What should line item number 1 be? How about a Big Ten team beating number 1? Women's volleyball leads the show thanks to last night the Gophers upsetting Texas, as in the reigning national champions Texas. 18th ranked Minnesota did it. Oh, by the way, the Gophers are the 6th highest ranked Big Ten volleyball team, and they beat number 1. Quite an opening week for the sport and for that team. With that, we're thrilled to welcome you into our Chicago studios. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Rally House, the official team shop of the Big Ten. Your city, your house, Rally House. Deep breath. Mike Hall and Anthony Herron here with you, sir. Volleyball takes down number 1, and the football goes 17-1 in the first week.
It really felt even better than 17-1 because there could have been that 18th victory in there as well, as the Gophers ended up playing outstanding. And by comparison with volleyball, it's good to see, yes, plenty of non-conference clashes in the football space, but some of those against highly ranked opponents, some of those against Power 5 opponents, and then with all the volume of games, there are going to be some of those against FCS teams as well. But as you warm up, not only week 1 with some big ones, but week 2 with big ones on the docket as well.
We're going to cover that throughout the course of the next hour. Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger joins us as well. Ross, this is a pretty fascinating week 1 in the books for everyone.
Yeah, it is. And a big one, as you mentioned, for the Big Ten, right? 17-1. This close to being 18-0 and undefeated if that Minnesota field goal goes in against North Carolina. But it was a fun opening weekend of college football, right? Threw some curveballs at us, just like it loves to do.
It didn't take me long to check the record books to find out 17 wins is the all-time record for one conference.
Okay.
In 1 week.
Not only for the Big Ten. Just
any conference that never had 17 wins in football in 1 week. It's time now for our big story, excuse me, focusing on quarterback performances this past week. Here's a look at the QBs that all threw 3 touchdown passes or more, highlighted on the far left by the Boilermakers and Illini gunslingers. And that was kind of a sign of the time. There was pretty good offense for a vast majority of the Big Ten this past week. So we're going to talk about QBs and ask which of these guys or anybody else stood out to you the most. And Ross, we're going to have you start off, and you're taking the quarterback who played last for the Big Ten on Sunday.
Yeah, Miller Moss, USC's quarterback, Heisman Trophy replacement, looked like a Heisman Trophy candidate, another one under Lincoln Riley. I was at the game actually in Vegas, so I can assure you he looked just as good in person as he did on TV. And maybe I'm biased because I was there, but I thought his performance on that stage against an SEC team and just some of the throws that he made, what was the best performance I saw from a quarterback, not just in the Big Ten, but all weekend nationally. He ended up with completing 75% of his passes, 378 yards. But most importantly, late in the game, right, the final 2 basically game-winning touchdown drives that USC mounted, he completed 7 of 8 passes, 87 yards, showed the accuracy, showed the poise, stepped up in the pocket when it was collapsing. And then he got some pretty good hands, right, from some of his receivers, Kyron Hudson with an incredible, like, one-handed grab and another great catch where he hung on to the ball while getting targeted and hit really hard late in the game. But Miller Moss shined for sure.
That targeting catch, by the way, will go down as one of the great catches all year, considering what was on the line, that he got smoked on the play, still held onto it, final minute of the game. It was really impressive.
That whole shot to Hudson, I mean, to complete that ball at any point in the game would have been a special throw and catch. But with what was on the line in that moment, up the sideline, the sort of touch and nuance that you have to be able to put on the ball to fit it in there with anticipation, Miller Moss on that stage, commanding it in that moment, I mean, that was really some legendary stuff. And you'll see whether or not it continues in the games moving forward here. But I've been saying for a few weeks how excited I am about seeing a full season of Miller Moss, a full sort of developmental arc for what he can be. After the game, he even credited Caleb Williams and just that relationship sitting behind him for a couple of years and how they've stayed in communication and what that was indicative of in the game for him being able to show courage and command, and crediting Caleb for it. I'm fond of alliteration in general, but I'm also fond of the way that Miller Moss played in some of those critical moments. So if you get that coupled with that USC defense, high-level QB play, playmakers on the outside, watch out for the Trojans.
That's one of the reasons why you like Miller Moss, is the alliteration of his name. By the way, you know what's fascinating about him? 2 starts. You go to the bowl game last year and this one. Both times he's thrown for 370 plus yards. Not one 100-yard receiver, which means he's spreading it around in just the only 2 starts that he has. Very poised look for a guy who's only had a couple college starts. Cade McNamara is a guy who's had plenty of college starts, but there was not the ability for him to have the great play so far since he's been at Iowa. In the first half, that continued. That changed in the second half.
Something at halftime materialized a little bit for the Hawkeyes. I saw a little bit of it developing. I was there in Iowa City calling the game, as you know, and when Iowa Hawkeyes, when Cade McNamara, when that offense came out of the locker room, they did look different. I think specifically to McNamara, one moment that I noticed in that game was as he began to take off and scramble a bit, and we've known the storyline in recent years here where he's had several lower body injuries, and talking to Kirk Ferentz the day before the game, he even highlighted that open scrimmage that Iowa fans got to go out and see, and McNamara didn't look great. Brendan Sullivan honestly didn't look that amazing either against that Iowa defense. But one element of that scrimmage that Kirk Ferentz noted was when Cade McNamara took off and ran, that was the moment where he first started to look like his old self. I would say a very similar moment happened in this game where the pass rush for Illinois State started to get home a little bit. The passing attack was sputtering, but then Cade McNamara took off and scrambled a couple of times. That seemed to be where his command of the game took over, and he began to step into his throws, stand in the pocket with more force, throw the ball with more urgency and determination, and then the passing attack, the receivers, the playmakers around him began to step forward as well. We saw a level of playmaking throughout the entirety of that second half that we haven't seen from Iowa's offense in a number of years. So you want to talk about being able to combine, Mike, excellent defense with a passing attack and some playmakers. Iowa's 2 best receivers, well, probably 2 best receivers, weren't even active for the game. So there's some growth that'll continue to happen for the Hawkeyes.
Ross, what did you see from Iowa's QB?
Well, I was wondering what happened at halftime, man. It'd be a fly on the wall there because that first half, I was covering the Georgia Clemson game there in Atlanta, but I had my iPad up, so I was turning back every now and then and watching Iowa. And in the first couple of quarters, man, it was like the offense of old, and then something clicked as Anthony broke it down there. McNamara started rolling, and it was good to see. I'm sure it was refreshing to see there in Iowa him do those things that we didn't see a lot in previous years. But what a second half! It was a little scared there in the first half.
13 of 14 for McNamara in the second half. And remember, the 40 points is good at all times. And you might go, well, yeah, it was against a team that they had 0 points the last 2 games of last year. So to get 40 in this first one is huge for Iowa. There were expectations at Penn State, Ross, that things would be different this year when they brought in a new offensive coordinator to help out the QB, Drew Aller. What'd you see from him?
Yeah, Andy Kotelnicki came over from Kansas. We spoke about the big stage that Miller Moss had. Sunday night, SEC opponent in Las Vegas. But Aller began his 3rd season under a new offensive coordinator on the road at a border state rival that a lot of people are picking to be a sleeper in the Big 12. And man, he passed the test, and so did Iowa's, or so did their offense there at Penn State. They kind of blew it open there in Kotelnicki's first game. Seems like a great pair. Aller and Kotelnicki averaged 13 yards of completion. Did Drew Aller. He only had 11 completions, 216 yards. That's pretty wild. You think of the big play ability there. If we can see the consistency on that through the year, because the defense is going to be there. It's been there for a long time, and they've been this close in a lot of these games with the Michigans and the Ohio States. Maybe that big play ability that we saw against West Virginia will give Penn State, that extra to get over some of those games. And Nick Singleton in the backfield, by the way, right? We saw him rolling as well. So it seems like there's a lot of high expectations after that game at Penn State to really make some noise this year. Remember, they get a few big games at home. I believe they get Ohio State at home later in the season.
Great combination. Excellent debut for that combination of Kotelnicki and Aller and what that can be for Penn State's offense. The chunk play, they had 4 plays of 40-plus yards in one game. Throughout the entire season last year, they only had 8 of those. So they've gotten halfway there just one game into this thing. And what really impressed me as much as anything was the fact that there was a weather delay in this contest. They had to step away for a couple hours, step back out onto the field, and Penn State was still locked in. They were still performing at a really high level. That speaks to me of the maturity of this team. So the development that's taking place between the white lines is a part of it, but that development of the roster, their focus, their mentality, that matters a lot as they move forward this season. But just the attack pass for an athlete like Drew Aller with as big of an arm as he has, yes, we saw Kotelnicki's offense set up some playmakers for a run after catch, but we saw more of an attack mentality as a passer from Drew Aller as well. That will pay dividends in this offense, especially with Trey. With Trey Wallace, Harrison
right?
Wallace III, with him on the outside making plays like he did, it's going to be big things.
Right. Wallace is no longer a secret. I mean, Penn State's been talking about how good that he is going to be their number one for most of the summer, and he certainly seemed to prove that in their first game. Did that again on the road in a tough place to play at West Virginia. Now, Aller was a really highly sought-after recruit when Penn State got him, but he wasn't as highly regarded as Dylan Raiola, the Nebraska quarterback, was. And the numbers were pretty darn good, but when you realize he only played one drive in the second half, they look even better.
There was so much control to his game. It's hard to imagine that a true freshman, with all the headlines that surrounded Dylan Raiola before he took the field for Nebraska, to be able to be as composed as he was, and in a variety of situations. And his offensive line played really well. They ran the ball effectively. He fed the football around to a number of playmakers, but he never got outside of himself. It never seemed like Dylan Raiola was reaching or forcing anything. There was just this comfort and composure to the way that he played. And I love the nuance that he threw the football with, because sometimes you did see the arm strength be shown off a little bit, but a lot of times there was touch and anticipation that really goes beyond his years for a guy with the experience of making his first collegiate start. And Nebraska fans, in front of what's obviously a very friendly crowd at Memorial Stadium, but you can feel that anticipation when you're stepping out there for the first time. And so that can sometimes make a young athlete wilt a little bit, because you don't want to let anyone down, especially when you factor in the family lineage and everything else. But Dylan Raiola stepped up. He commanded that stage, and his teammates, you could see the confidence that was infused into them with the way that he played, Ross. And so now you got Nebraska's defense is going to continue to be part of the storyline for them this season. If they can run the ball like that, now maybe this is a complete Huskers football team that can be really formidable.
Yeah, we talked all off season throughout the summer and then over August about Raiola and how he looked at camp, how he looked in spring, how he looked in off-season workouts. And the word was mature beyond his years. And I think that's what we saw. I got to go back and watch some clips of the game. Couldn't watch it live, but we saw a guy who was poised in the pocket, made the right decisions. And you're right, Nebraska played complementary football, right? They were able to run the ball and spread it around, played great defense. How about Isaiah Nayar? I think we'll talk about him later in the show, but 6 receptions, 120 yards. So he gives Raiola certainly a big target there, and it was impressive for game one of a true freshman. Even though it's UTEP, right, and he'll get tested much more this week. An incredible showing.
Right. Raiola is going to be a name we're talking about throughout the entire season. I think we knew that going in, but it's been certified for sure. We got time to squeeze in one more quarterback, Russ. I was in West Lafayette for the Boilermakers, and while one storyline is how much better their defense is going to be this year in the second year of Ryan Walters, the other huge storyline is that Hudson Card is healthy, and that's meaning really good things.
Wow, and we could tell, right? One incompletion, and it was just maybe a little overthrown. But if you watch the clip, the receiver maybe could have dove for the ball and kept it perfect. He almost pitched a perfect game. Hudson Card, I think he tied the FBS record there, 96% completion rate, 4 TDs as well. Really, really impressive. I know it was against Indiana State, but hey, Anthony, it's tough to complete 24 of 25 passes against air in practice, let alone to do it in a college football game. It was pretty incredible to watch, and certainly will give him some confidence going forward, which he'll need. Right up next after a bye week is Notre Dame.
I mean, 17 completions in a row, historic day, 96% of the passes completed by Hudson Card there. That's as much as anyone has ever been able to complete on 20-plus pass attempts. Purdue fans have seen that from the quarterback. Have they seen the totality, though? This team performance, a defense that's scoring, a run game that provides balance. It's a new look Purdue squad under Ryan Walters in his second year.
Yeah, I really didn't think coming back from West Lafayette that we wouldn't at all be talking about Devin Mockabee or Reggie Love, and instead be talking about the great performance by the defense and even better performance by the quarterback. The first conference matchup of the season is coming up on Saturday. Terps and Spartans. Look here at the stat lines for the QBs, and fairly different performances for each of these two, as Billy Edwards Jr. was remarkable in his first game as the full-time starter, replacing Taliatunga Vailoa. Aiden Chiles struggled a little bit, started off in real trouble. First pass as a Spartan was an interception. He did come around a little bit. Still a very talented guy. So let's look at some key matchups as we start to turn the page towards week 2. My call, Anthony Herron and Ross Dellinger joining you. Now, Ross, let's start off with that conference matchup. Michigan State taking on Maryland. Give me a matchup you're looking for within that game.
Well, I mean, you just showed it, right? You want to see these quarterbacks play round 2 and see if Aiden Chiles can shake off the rust, so to speak. We talked a lot about Chiles at Michigan State coming over with Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, knowing the system, but it certainly was a struggle. I didn't expect him in Michigan State's offense to struggle as much as they did. So let's see what they can do against a Maryland team that played really well last week against UConn. It was UConn, but played well. And Billy Edwards, as you mentioned there, played incredibly well. Josh Gaddis at coordinator, I think he completed like 74% of his passes, 300 yards. Well, it was really impressive. But Sparty has some kinks to work out. Probably not the best place to do it on the road in the Big Ten, but maybe they can get it done and shake off a little. Chiles can shake off a little of that rust that we saw last week.
Ross, I was talking to you a little bit last week about the Joe Rossi acquisition, that big hire that Jonathan Smith made. So getting him in as a defensive coordinator, I wasn't really completely sure how quickly that would pay dividends for a defense that has some experience back from the previous regime, some newness that's in here, stepping onto the field for the first time. I was thoroughly impressed with the Spartans' defense, even though overall the offense, the team, didn't quite look as dominant as folks would have been hoping for in their first matchup. You expect that growth from week 1 to week 2. Certainly there will be a step up in competition as well, though. That Michigan State defense will test Billy Edwards and that Maryland offense in a way that UConn's defense just frankly wasn't able to in their week 1 matchup. And beyond Billy Edwards himself, I do wonder how Maryland's run game will do against that Spartan front 7, because they had all kinds of sacks and tackles for loss in week 1. They were in the opposing backfield. If they get that again this week, if Maryland can't really get out of second gear with their run game, then that'll put even more pressure on Billy Edwards to see what he can do, because he threw the ball at a really high level. I was talking to Kylan Mills about it before the show here, because she and I are going to be on the call this weekend with Jason Ross Jr. So looking forward to having a conference clash here very early in the season. But that matchup to me stands out. Can Maryland run the football, or can Michigan State make them one-dimensional?
I'd be curious how much offense Michigan State has, too. The last couple of games against Maryland, even though, like you said, we mostly know Maryland for scoring, Michigan State scored 22 points total in the last 2 games that they've played against the Terps. Let's go to our next game, and it's one of the big ones, Ross. The eyes of Texas will be upon Ann Arbor. The eyes of the country will be a top 10 matchup, arguably the 2 biggest brands in all of college football meeting up with Texas and Michigan inside the game. What are you looking for?
Yeah, big time matchup. Week 2 often brings us not as many big, like, top 25 collisions. Everybody breaks out in the week 1, and we have these big games, and then week 2 there's some duds, but this one is the game, right? I mean, it takes the cake for week 2. Ann Arbor, a big noon kickoff. Watch Michigan's offense. We hopefully will see a little more from it. They certainly struggled in the opener. Davis Warren, of course, former walk-on, great story, right? Diagnosed with leukemia, and then boom, walks on to Michigan and wins the job after sitting for a few years in a competition against Alex Orji. Orji played a little bit. I think he got like 8 or 9 snaps, but I'm really watching how this Michigan offense and how much improvement maybe we see from one week to the other. We knew there was going to be a drop-off, right, from last year. I mean, it was a championship team, lost plenty off of it. And now they get a really what is a – I know they just moved to the SEC, Texas, but a quintessential SEC type roster with Texas and an SEC type defense. They are big, they are strong and athletic. So from week 1 to week 2, what kind of progress, what kind of improvement will we see from Michigan, specifically the passing game, because they're going to need it?
And between the two squads, I mean, the team that looked better on the line of scrimmage, especially on their offensive line, was Texas. Now, between the two teams, though, the anticipation from what we've seen in recent years is that Michigan is the squad that dominates the LOS week in and week out. There's been some shuffling on the offensive line. A lot of experience was lost from the last couple of seasons, especially that squad that won the national championship last year. But they will have the opportunity to step forward. And Texas did lose some experience on the interior of their defensive line. We didn't see a lot of signs that Michigan would be able to just sort of lean on the quarterback position as of yet. Davis Warren made his first start. Alex Zorzi rotates in a little bit. But Michigan has to get a traditional run game going at a higher level to get Donovan Edwards going at a higher level. Yes, Khalil Mullings has shown that he can be a guy who adds you legitimate depth. Is he an elite level back? I'm not sure about that yet, but is Donovan Edwards consistently an elite level back? That's where you got that from Blake Corum in recent years, where you knew what you got from that guy week in and week out. That offensive line for the Wolverines against what, like Ross is talking about, a very formidable front seven for Texas. But on the interior, they did lose some talent there to the National Football League. Michigan has got to get better on the O-line this week versus where they were last.
I'm pretty sure the Wolverine faithful will be very kind to Quinn Ewers, not only because he's the opposing quarterback, right, but also used to be a Buckeye. I expect a lot of flowers thrown his way as he comes out.
He did lead Texas to a win in Tuscaloosa last year. They've commanded that hostile environment before.
That's true. They have. On to what I think is one of the most underrated rivalries nationally. Iowa and Iowa State, you know plenty about it, sir, as a former Hawkeye. Ross, what are your thoughts this particular season with this in-state matchup?
Yeah, always. This one's the Cy-Hawk, always exciting. I think I was looking up just like history of the series. 7 of the last 8 won by Iowa. I know Anthony loves that. But the last 5 meetings, the winner of the game averaged 17 points offensively. So it's a pretty low scoring games. I'm excited to see round 2 for Tim Lester and that new offense at Iowa, McNamara, and what they can do against a little stiffer competition. Iowa State looked good last week defensively against North Dakota, kind of shut them down completely, but that was North Dakota. But Iowa State's defense, I think a lot of folks expected a good amount of progress this year. They returned a lot of starters, so be interesting to see what McNamara and crew can do. And how about Reese Vanderzee of Iowa too? Yeah. It would be interesting to see what he does. He's kind of that breakout player, I think first freshman receiver to have 2 TDs. In a game at Iowa, an Iowa freshman receiver to have 2 TDs in a game since 2020. Pretty wild. I think the whole Iowa receiving group had 3 TDs all of last year. So it'll be interesting to see can Iowa State kind of slow him down and can Iowa get him going. It should be a good one.
No doubt, Ross. I mean, out of many second-half highlights in that game the other day, one of the biggest highlights was Cade McNamara evading the rush and kind of just flicking his wrist down the field to Jacob Gill beyond multiple defenders, just sort of finding a quadrant of the end zone where he throws his receiver open. And that was the third of those 3 TD receptions from receivers, tying what they had all of last season with those 3 touchdown grabs from wideouts. And I do think that one thing that was a little bit underappreciated was how Iowa's pass rush last season took a little bit of a step back over where it had been in recent years without them having to add any blitz pressure. We know that's not exactly what Phil Parker's known for anyway. Really impressed by their pass rush. Now, yes, it was against Illinois State, but just the pass rush mechanics that guys like Aaron Graves, who ended up with 3 sacks in the game, showcased throughout, that should pay dividends for Iowa and see if they can get some heat on Rocco Beck because, yes, in week 1, he didn't have to face a whole lot of it. He lit up the night sky for the Cyclones. They will have to have him under a lot more duress.
Another great non-conference rivalry is going to be Colorado and Nebraska this upcoming weekend. Tons of history. Thankfully, they've started to reignite it, even though it's now a non-conference game. Russ, what are you looking for there?
Yeah, two big matchups here, right? You got Shadir Sanders, quarterback at Colorado, and his favorite target, Travis Hunter, at receiver. And then on the other side, Dylan Raiola and Isaiah Nair of Nebraska. Watching those two connection points, and more specifically, let's watch Travis Hunter, who, of course, plays cornerback. I think he missed only 2 plays last week, plays on both sides of the ball. It's incredible. Travis Hunter against Raiola and Nair on offense. I'm really watching that defensively and how Nebraska will handle going up against Hunter. He's everywhere on the field, cornerback. He's everywhere on the field, and receiver as well.
I really love the way that Illinois' defense, because they're going to end up having an opportunity to face Kansas again for the second year in a row. And as much as Luke Altmaier was exceptional in their opening game, love the way they ran the football with Caden Fagan. Their defense, of course, will be tested by that Jayhawks offense. And Aaron Henry, I think in year 2, his ascension right now as the true leader of that Illinois defense, he'll be tested at a much higher level this week than he was in the first contest out. But it just looked like a really confident Illinois team. Yes, you're not facing a Power 5 opponent in the first matchup, but that confidence, if that carries over from the previous week to this one, with all the experience that's back, it feels like they should have been able to beat Kansas last season. That will be a big deal for Illinois that knows they've been building towards something this season. Could end up being a huge win for the Illini if they pull it off.
The Bill Self Bowl, Kansas and Illinois.
Yeah, right.
We'll see if that defense, which pitched a shutout last week, can look close to that good against a Kansas team that, even though they don't have Annie Kolnicki anymore, still have been pretty darn good offensively in recent years. Northwestern has a brand new athletic director, Mark Jackson, and he's had himself quite the career already. He was named the Under Armour Athletic Director of the Year just a few years ago while he was in charge of the athletic programs at Villanova. Former athlete himself back in D3 in the 90s, and he's good enough to join us now and talk about his new gig. Mark, you had things going quite well for you at Villanova in your tenure, a couple of men's basketball national championships. Why leave there to come to Northwestern?
It's a good question. The whys, and they're really obvious. As hard as it was to leave a wonderful place at Villanova that will carry with us, me and my family, forever, I think I was ready for a new challenge, and there was so much alignment with where Northwestern wants to go and where I feel my career has taken me. And when I considered all that it offered, it became really, really clear that this was the right next step for us. And I just cannot wait to take on the challenge. And only been around here a few days, and every day I get more excited about what's in front of us.
What's going to be most similar and what's going to be most different for you in this new job?
Well, I think first, most similar, aligned with elite academic profiles. They're both private institutions. The expectations around the brand, both on and off the field, are extremely high. The networks are global, lifelong, very influential networks. It's just Northwestern's bigger, and they're doing it on a bigger stage in the best conference in college athletics. And, the demands there will be more, they'll be broader, they'll be deeper. And I have some learning to do. I have some listening to do in terms of what the differences are. But so far, so good. I feel like Villanova has given me an unbelievable experience and has prepared me really well, along with the other experiences before that.
In your years as an athletic director, what have you learned are the most important things that a good AD has to do?
You have to immerse yourself into the community. We can't be on an island in athletics. We have to immerse ourselves not only in the athletic community, but in the broader campus community, especially at an elite top 10 academic university like Northwestern. That is a priority. I am not a guy that likes to sit in my office. I'm not a guy that likes to be behind my desk. I want to get out. I want to meet the student athletes. I want to meet our donors. I want to meet our alums. I want to meet the people in the city of Chicago that have a wonderful connection to our university. I'm an externally oriented athletic director. Now, you can't take your eye off the important things in the academic piece and the success we have in the classroom. And some of that requires being on campus and having structure and discipline. But I'm really, really excited just to get out and and try and, raise the profile of what already is a globally respected brand.
This is a presidential election year, and who are you voting for? Kidding, just kidding, just kidding. No, they often ask presidential candidates, like, day one on the job, what are you going to do? So what is it you see as, like, one of your first priorities of things you want to get done now that you're officially in charge in Evanston?
Okay, well, day one on the job actually has already come and went. And
That's true.
We had a field hockey win, we had a men's soccer win, and then the next day we had a football win, and the next day we had another field hockey win. No, I'm kidding. It's just again, I want to listen, learn, immerse myself. I have a meeting here with our entire department following this interview. I just met with the football team Saturday during the game. I met hundreds and hundreds of alums and donors on this unbelievable lakeside setting that was just unbelievable to take in. I've been around college and professional athletics for 30 years, and I've never seen an experience like that one that was just not next to a lake, but on top of a lake. And to come out with a victory was just phenomenal. So, the immediate thing is just to let people know who I am and what I'm about, and try and meet as many people as I can. And then, determine the next steps and evaluate, what we're going to be. Critically important, as we know, we're going through a historic time in college athletics where there's a lot of modeling, a lot of figuring out what's next. And, and some of that is gloom and doom about these dark clouds and impending storms around college athletics. But look, we're not going to take that approach here. We're going to attack it with a positive attitude and a positive mentality. I think Northwestern's equipped to handle whatever's coming next because of who we are as an institution, and not just as an athletic department.
You led me to my next question, which is, you're in this kind of unique situation as an athletic director where football is an incredibly important sport, and there are already plans in place to be building a brand new stadium, while they also have, like you said, this fascinating new stadium that's a temporary stadium for the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's a really exciting opportunity. And look, I've been associated with some big capital projects before, none like this one. I think what the Ryan family and Pat Ryan Jr. specifically have put together is going to be a huge win for Northwestern, obviously, our athletic department, the Evanston community, and really the greater Chicago community as well. We are reimagining, the whole fan experience around a dynamic stadium, unlike anything else in college football. And I had the chance to meet with Pat for a while when I first got here Friday, and dive into the plans with him, and couldn't be any more excited. And what that means, it's a recruiting advantage, it's financial stability, it's additional resources, but then really providing a unique experience on so many different fronts that will provide advantages across the board.
Unique is such an appropriate word to describe your situation and your school in general. The academics are literally as good as just about any college in the country. You're in a conference athletically that is as good as literally any in the country. And those are tough to balance, especially because the alumni base you have, it just factually isn't as big as the Wisconsins and the Ohio States, et cetera, in this conference. So what can be done in your job to keep pace with those bigger schools?
Yeah, we're not ones to compare ourselves against anybody. We're going to do it our way. We think we have all the right resources for all the things that I mentioned, right? An elite academic profile, top 10 university, top 10 research. I mean, the most beautiful campus in America. We got an energetic and accomplished corral of coaches from top to bottom. I'll put our head coaches up against anybody. I think we can recruit an elite student athlete here in a way that's different than everybody else. When you consider the value of a Northwestern degree, that may be our biggest recruiting and retention tool. And then when they get here, we can develop them in a comprehensive way from top to bottom, not just athletically, but academically and socially, so that those student athletes go on to have success, they win championships, and guess what? They leave Northwestern with a love and connection to this place for the rest of their lives. And that's happening. That's happening. If you look at the past year, right, we had 7 Big Ten championships and 6, I think, Coach of the Year in the Big Ten. It's doable here. And And then to combine that with a really well-resourced, well-connected, influential donor base and alumni base, I think we have all the right ingredients to do it our way, to do it right, and to compete at the highest levels.
I mentioned at the top, you played football yourself back in the early 90s, defensive back in Division III. Give me your greatest athletic highlight.
Oh, man. You know, I was with my brother last night, and he played football at UMass, and he realized and discovered that, YouTube, you can go back and find clips, and he played like a long time ago in the 80s. I played in the 90s. He's much older than I am. But if I had to hearken down into, a memory that stands out, man, the CBB title, right? This is Colby Bates Bowden. This is big news, right? We never lost a CBB title in my 4 years, and that was a team effort, and I take great pride in that. We went 7-1 my senior year at Colby. We only play 8 games, right, in the NESCAC. And I don't think any other team has outdone us since then. So that's a shout out to the class of 1995.
Listen, don't underplay CBB. SportsCenter leads with that most nights. We've made tons of shows around CBB titles. That's a big deal, Mark.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it. Everybody wants to know what's happening there. Absolutely.
Mark, congratulations on the new gig. I think you're going to be a great fit there. You're going to love being a part of the Big Ten and living life in Evanston. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, you bet. Doors are always open to you. Go Cats.